What a great time to be alive. It's August and it feels like football weather outside. Had to wear a jacket on my morning walk earlier today. I'm wearing a jacket now. It's freezing in my home office. That's a good thing after the sweltering dog days we've already experienced. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Kevin Scarbinsky. This is Scarbo Knows. You can call me Scarbo if you're feeling nice. If you're not, you can call me something else, as many of you do. Hey, we want to say thank you today. We've got a new sponsor on the show. Our very first sponsor, Money Management Services. They are Birmingham's financial advisors. What sets them apart is they are a fee-only financial services company run by the Rice family. They are a family. I've known the family for years. I've coached a couple of the sons, and they turned out none the worse for wear. So hope you'll check them out. Check out their website. They are, again, a great family with a great established financial services firm here in Birmingham. All right, we've got to talk polls. One poll in particular, one preseason poll just out in the last 24 hours. That is the USA Today Coaches Poll, the preseason top 25. Everyone looks forward to these. No, they don't matter in a sense in the big picture. The only poll that truly matters, that makes a difference, is that College Football Playoff Committee poll that will start later in the season. But these do establish a precedent. They do create a perception in people's minds of which teams are going to be championship contenders or are most likely to be championship contenders, and which teams, well, they're on the outside looking in. And as usual, the usual suspects are all over the top of the poll. Texas, this was an astounding true fact. This is the first time ever. Forget the history and tradition of Texas football. Darrell Royal, Ricky Williams, Major Applewhite, Vince Young in the 2005 national championship team, Mac Brown. This is the first time Texas has ever been preseason number one in the coaches poll. That's pretty amazing to contemplate. So no pressure, Steve Sarkisian. No pressure, Arch Manning. But you are the target. You are number one. They got 28 first-place votes, and those are the numbers you see in parentheses, the number of first-place votes that each team got. And then Ohio State, your reigning national champion. The word defending national champion doesn't really fit in college sports. It hasn't for a long time and probably fits less than ever right now with the turnover in rosters from year to year. And then you've got Penn State coming in at number 3, Georgia at number 4, Notre Dame, Clemson, Oregon, and you have to go all the way down to number 8 to find Alabama. As usual, you would expect the SEC to have the most teams in the top 25. You've got 9 of them in that top 25. The Big Ten checks in with 6, the Big 12, followed by the ACC. Notre Dame is an independent, and then Boise State representing the group of 6. But we're going to focus on Alabama today because to see Alabama start a season in any poll at number 8 in the country is a little mind-boggling. It is the lowest that the Crimson Tide has been ranked in the preseason coaches poll since 2008. That was 17 years ago. That was Nick Saban's second season in Tuscaloosa. So the Crimson Tide that year also got no first-place votes, also was not ranked. They received votes. They were in that amorphous category, also receiving votes, where you find teams like Auburn this year, which if you ran the poll out and put a number by each team's name based on the number of votes they got beyond the top 25, Auburn would check in at number 32 going into the season. That seems about right. Maybe a little optimistic, maybe a little pessimistic if Auburn is going to be as good as Hugh Freeze and the fan base thinks. But we're focusing on Alabama today. And look, most schools would love once in their lifetime to be ranked in any poll at any time at number 8 in the country. But as we know, Alabama is not most schools. And they're going in the wrong direction in that sense. Again, this is so much based on perception. And the perception is Alabama's not going to win the national championship. They're not going to win the SEC championship because you see 2 SEC teams ranked ahead of them in Texas and Georgia. Texas, again, at the top. So what does that tell us about the progression of Alabama football, especially the post-Saban impression of Alabama football? Let's look at where Alabama was ranked in the preseason coaches poll throughout the Nick Saban era. And you talk about respect. These are coaches, again. Well, we say coaches. It is the coaches poll. We have evidence through the years that maybe the coaches themselves don't sit down and pore over the starting lineups, returning starters, returning production to produce their preseason poll. They might get a little help from their sports information directors, but still, it is called the coaches poll. And look at where the coaches put Alabama to start every season going back to 2007. Again, Saban's first year in Tuscaloosa. His first 2 years, they didn't think a whole lot of the Crimson Tide. They received votes. They were in that category, but they were not in the top 25. And then, of course, that 2008 season was the year that changed everything about Alabama football, starting with the 2008 recruiting class that featured Julio Jones and Mark Ingram and guys like that set the standard for that program. Mark Barron, we could go on and on. It was the best recruiting class in the country, and it proved to be that as they hit the field and as they developed throughout their college careers. And then Alabama destroyed Clemson in the kickoff classic that year, and they were off and rolling, went undefeated that year. And actually, they were number 1 in the SEC championship game, that epic, the first of 2 back-to-back Alabama-Florida SEC championship gargantuan battles. And that year, Tim Tebow got the better of the Crimson Tide, and Florida went on to win its second national title in 3 years. But that was the end of disrespecting Alabama in the preseason poll or any other poll. In the next year, in 2009, you see Alabama started number 5. And the years highlighted in white, those are the national championship seasons that Alabama experienced during the Saban era. There are 6 of them. You see, as time went on, that they dwindled in frequency. You saw 3 in the first 6 years. You saw 2 in that next 6-year period, and then 1 in his final 6 years. Did not win it his last 3 years, which was the longest stretch of non-big ring seasons in Tuscaloosa. But this tells us something. This tells us that other coaches don't see Alabama as a championship program this year, year 2 under Kalen DeBoer. And I'll tell you what, if I'm Kalen DeBoer, I am loving this. I am having posters printed. And what I'm going to focus on is not the number 8 necessarily in front of Alabama's name, but when you go across on the top 25 chart and it has first place votes listed, I'm focusing on that 0. 0, not 1. There are 7 other SEC coaches besides Kalen DeBoer who are voting in this year's USA Today coaches poll. There are 67 coaches altogether. DeBoer is one of them. But 7 other SEC coaches have votes. And not one of them put Alabama number 1. Not Hugh Freeze from Auburn. Not Kirby Smart from Georgia. Not Mark Stoops from Kentucky. Not Clark Lee from Vanderbilt. Who else is on there? Billy Napier from Florida. Mike Elko from Texas A&M. And Eli Drinkwitz from Missouri. And I might, if I were Kalen DeBoer, I might go a little Animal House here. Drinkwitz, dead. Lee, dead. Freeze, dead. Smart, dead. Those men coach teams that will play Alabama this year. And imagine the affront. Not one of them gave Alabama a first place vote in the preseason poll. And again, I don't know how much Kalen DeBoer, we're still learning about him. We're still learning about his approach to the mental game, the mind games that go on. Nick Saban was a psychological genius in that way. He understood the mental game and focused on the mental game as much as any coach I think I've ever been around in any sport. Wimp Sanderson was an early forerunner, the longtime Alabama basketball coach, the winningest coach in Alabama basketball history. He focused a lot on the mental game. And Wimp put it as simply and directly as you could. In his mind, he said mental is to physical as 3 is to 1. He thought that's how important the mental part of the game was in building a championship team and a championship program. And then Saban came along and he really took it to another level. I mean, he worked with people like Kevin Elko, the renowned sports psychologist. And so Saban was always looking for ways to give his team an edge. We really don't know what DeBoer's style is there. It's interesting. I was on a radio show with Wimp Sanderson and his son Barry in Tuscaloosa. They do a daily show there in the mornings, and I'm a guest with them every Tuesday. We have some really interesting, spirited conversations during those visits. And Barry Sanderson asked me in our last visit, what would you say Alabama football is under Kalen DeBoer? What's its MO? What's its style? And I said, you know what? It's really still to be determined. I don't think we have enough evidence. We don't have a large enough sample size to know that. It seemed like that he ran a looser ship. And then Nick Saban, well, it didn't seem like it. That is true, was true last year, is true this year. They say they're working harder, but you didn't get to interview the strength coach at Alabama when Nick Saban was the coach. Scott Cochran, the longtime strength coach there, became a public figure. He became a media darling in a lot of ways. He was on the Jumbotron chanting, yeah, 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 and just motivating the players. He had a presence above and beyond any staff member at Alabama in any position, let alone as a strength coach. But he didn't do interviews. We didn't get to visit with him, except on days like SEC championship games, after those games. Well, we didn't really interview him then. But when Alabama would play in the playoff, when they would play in the BCS championship game, on media day, when every staff member and every player was made available or was supposed to be made available, we didn't get to talk to Rolando McClain before the national championship game against Texas. They said that he had an upset stomach that day. And Rolando didn't really enjoy talking to the media. So I don't know how much of that was just nervousness or queasiness at the prospect of facing thousands and thousands of reporters asking him questions. But those were great opportunities to talk to other people on the Alabama staff that you normally didn't get under Saban. He was a one-voice guy. He told us that the day he was hired, he came in there and we visited with him in different groups. The electronic media, which Ray Perkins, longtime Alabama coach who followed Bear Bryant, used to call the electric media. They met with him in one group, and then us, the print media, when there was a print media, we got to meet with Saban in a different group in a boardroom there in the football building. And he basically told us, look, you're not going to be talking to every coach on my staff whenever you want. You're not going to be talking to freshmen. You're going to be talking to me. I will set the tone and I will send the messages for this program. So you didn't get to talk to the rest of the staff. But obviously, Kalen DeBoer has been more open about that. He's already had a number of assistant coaches available to the media. You've got the strength coach out there talking about how many guys can squat 500 pounds. Caden Proctor, the left tackle, can squat 1,000, I believe he said. I'm trying to picture that in my mind. It makes my brain hurt, not to mention my quads, my hamstrings, and my lower back, just to think about squatting 1,000 pounds. But it is a more open program. It's certainly a more laid-back program. That's Kalen DeBoer's personality. That's his style. But I don't know that he's truly put his stamp on the program. But I will say this. What these polls indicate, what this preseason poll indicates, is that he and this program don't have the respect that Alabama has enjoyed for years and years and years, thanks to Nick Saban, thanks to the performance on the field, thanks to the championships they've won, and even the championships they competed for when they didn't get it done in the end. They're going to have to reestablish themselves in that way. So that is a great motivational tool that the coaches have handed Kalen DeBoer. We don't think you're going to win the national championship. Not one of the 66 other voters in the USA Today poll put Alabama at number one. Think about that. That tells you something. It may not mean much when we get into the season. It won't mean anything if Alabama goes to Athens, Georgia, and beats the Bulldogs for the second year in a row under DeBoer. It won't mean anything if Alabama doesn't slip up against the Vanderbilts and the Oklahomas, teams they are supposed to beat based on the perceived talent they have on the roster. Then this won't matter. Then next year, Alabama will be ranked in the top 3, the top 5, as they were every year under Saban starting in 2009. But right now, they've got something to prove. And so does the poll itself. You know, I wanted to pull some fun facts out of this preseason USA Today poll. So I did a little research. Who wins national championships? What pole position to start with is your best bet on who's going to be the last team standing, who's going to raise that trophy, stand in that confetti at the national championship game, as Ohio State did last year, as Alabama did 6 times under Nick Saban. So interestingly, in the last 25 years, let's go back to 1999, Florida State went wire to wire. Peter Warrick was unbelievable, the outstanding wide receiver playmaker for the Seminoles, and they beat Mike Vick and Virginia Tech in the national championship game, Bobby Bowden's second national title. But you're better off starting at number 2 than you are at number 1. You're 3 times more likely, or you were over the last quarter century, to win a national championship if you started at the 2nd spot than on top of the poll. 9 times in the last 25 years, to try to translate this for you if it looks a little confusing on your screen. 9 times in the last 25 years, the team that started number 2 in the coaches' preseason poll won the national championship. Only 3 times did a team go wire to wire. As I mentioned, the first time was Florida State in 99, and then USC did it in 2004. Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, Pete Carroll, those guys. That was the year Auburn didn't get a chance to play for the national championship, despite going undefeated, because Oklahoma, which started number 2, also ran the table. And then you had a 1 versus 2 matchup, and USC absolutely blew the doors off of the Sooner Schooner in the national championship game. And Auburn, and I will argue this to the day I cannot argue any longer, that Auburn team in 2004 would have competed with that USC team in the national championship game in the Orange Bowl had they been given the opportunity. But they weren't, and that helped lead us to the playoff. But number 1 and number 3 and number 5, those spots in the preseason poll, they've each won it 3 times. Twice the team that started number 6 won the national championship. And then you have the outliers. And I think this is relevant looking again at where Alabama is right now at preseason number 8. That's where Florida started in 2006, Urban Meyer's second year, when Chris Leak was entering his senior year as the starting quarterback. Tim Tebow was a true freshman. He came in and provided that tremendous compliment. He was the battering ram in short yardage at the goal line, and it was a great 1-2 punch at quarterback for the Gators, and they had a great defense that year as well. And so they started at number 8 and went on to win the national championship. But you also had Ohio State win it in 2002. They started number 12. Florida State in 2013, I was a little surprised. I didn't remember them with Jameis Winston that season starting so low. They started number 12, and they went on to beat Auburn in the national championship in the Rose Bowl with 13 seconds left. Jameis threw a touchdown pass to Kelvin Benjamin over Chris Davis, the hero of the kick 6, which still breaks a lot of Auburn hearts in retrospect to remember that they were so close to winning a second national championship in 4 years after Cam Newton and company did it. And interestingly, another footnote talking about preseason polls and what people think of your team to start, what other coaches think of your team to start a season. That Auburn team in 2010 started number 23. Think about that. Nobody knew when they kicked off that season that Cam Newton was going to become or produce the single best individual season by any player in the history of college football. Let me repeat that. Cam Newton in 2010 produced the single greatest individual season in college football history because he took a team that without him would have been at best 7-5. He took a team that did not have a single player other than himself that would ever run for a single yard in the NFL or catch a single pass in the NFL. And he led that team to an undefeated season, and he led a comeback from down 24-0 in Bryant-Denny Stadium against what might have been Nick Saban's most talented Alabama team, against the most hostile crowd I've ever witnessed in person. And Cam Newton led that comeback known as the comeback. So they started number 23. Now, that is obviously an outlier. Oklahoma in 2000, they started at number 20. But for the most part, if you don't start in the top 5, you're not winning a national championship. So what does that mean? If the coaches are accurate, as they typically are, again, you're not having teams come from off the pace, from out of the pack to win national championships. You're just not. It doesn't happen. It rarely happens. So that's good news for Texas. It's better news for Ohio State, which starts at number 2. After winning it all last year, they're better off starting at number 2. And do you think the coaches, they wouldn't do something like this? Because obviously they're individual votes. But isn't it curious that number 2 Ohio State will host number 1 Texas in the very first game of the year in Columbus, Ohio, the very first big game of the year on Saturday, August 30th. That is the first time I believe we've ever had a 1 versus 2 matchup in game 1 of the season. So all the pressure is going to be on Texas. All the pressure is going to be on Arch Manning. All the pressure is going to be on Steve Sarkisian to live up to that number 1 ranking. And imagine the howling if Manning doesn't have a great game. Imagine the consternation, the wailing, the gnashing of teeth, the what's the opposite of all right? Matthew McConaughey weeping real tears in the horseshoe on Saturday evening, August 30th, if the Longhorns don't get it done. Of course, 1 loss is not going to knock you out of the playoff. It's not going to keep you from winning the SEC championship because that's not even a conference game, obviously. But that is a huge game to start the season, as is Alabama at Florida State. We talk a lot in this state about the Auburn at Baylor opener and what that means to Hugh Freeze in year 3. And it is a game of massive importance. But don't sleep on Alabama at Florida State. Don't think that this Florida State team is going to look like the last Florida State team that was completely discombobulated, that lost its way early and never regained it. They've got a mobile quarterback in Tommy Castellanos. They've got a new offensive coordinator in Gus Malzahn, who did his best work as both a coordinator and as a head coach when he had a mobile quarterback. Think Cam Newton. And Castellanos would be a pocket Cam Newton at his size, but think Nick Marshall. Gus Malzahn, game 1, with a new quarterback, a new offense, and Mike Norvell, the head coach of Florida State, he's an offensive guy also. So what does Alabama prepare for? Kane Womack, the Alabama defensive coordinator, said, we're going to have a pretty large package for that game to be prepared for a lot of different things. Do they spend too much time preparing for too many things? And will they be focused on the things that Florida State is going to lean on in that first game in Tallahassee? So Alabama has a chance. Now, Florida State does not have a lot of respect coming into this season. But Alabama has a chance to make a statement in game one. They have a chance to tell Hugh Freeze and Kirby Smart and Eli Drinkwitz and Clark Lee and the other SEC coaches and the other coaches from around the country who thought, yeah, these guys are going to be good, but they're not going to be great. Number 8 is not great if you're Alabama. Not in the preseason, not in midseason, not in November, and certainly not in January. Now, it beats where they finished last year after losing to Michigan. They finished number 17. Think about that. Alabama finishing a season number 17 in the coaches poll. That's unacceptable. And it will create people crawling out on ledges across this state if it happens again. I don't expect it will happen again. If Ty Simpson is what we think he can be as a first-year starter who's in his 4th year on campus, i.e. or e.g. or kind of sort of like Greg McElroy, first-year starter 2009, 4th year on campus. Mac Jones, 4th-year starter. First-year starter, 4th year on campus, 2020. They both won national championships. 4 of Alabama's 6 national championships under Nick Saban were won behind a first-year starting quarterback who was not inexperienced, who had spent time in the program, who was ready for his close-up. We'll see if Ty Simpson follows in that path. And we'll see if Alabama can change the perception, which is slipping nationally. It's slipping in the conference. Alabama's not what it used to be. Alabama has fallen and it can't get up. That's what people are saying when Alabama doesn't get a single first-place vote in the preseason coaches poll and when it finishes at number 8 in the preseason poll behind 2 other SEC teams. All right, Alabama, you've been challenged. We'll see if you can answer the bell. All right, that's going to do it for me, Kevin Scarbinsky, here on Scarbo Knows. Again, we want to welcome our first sponsor to the program, Money Management Services, Birmingham's financial advisors. Click the QR code, take a pic, visit their website, give them a call. The Rice family, good people doing great work for the people of Birmingham. Until next time, I'm Kevin Scarbinsky. See you.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.